Warning: this episode contains some strong language. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and
Hi.
welcome to
Oh,
Tales from the Trunk.
so sorry.
You're good. Reading the stories that didn't make it. I'm Hillary B. Bisnieks. Listeners, I am thrilled today to have the author of, most recently, Stars Hide Your Fires, Jessica Mary Best. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. At the time that we're recording this book is not quite out. It comes out tomorrow in actual time. You, lucky listeners, will have it in your local independent bookstore already at the time that you're hearing this. But I was lucky enough to get an email out of the blue from your publicist, Jess, who said, "Hey, I have somebody who I think would be a great fit for your show, and also I think that you would absolutely love her book. Can I send you that? And also, can I have get this person on your show?" And I was like, "Of course you can. And yes, please do send me free books." And I have been digging the hell out of this book. We will get into that in a little bit, but first, we're going to have a little bit of a treat today, dear listeners, because Jess is not just an author, she's also a podcaster. And so today we are going to be doing a little bit of table read from Third Wheel. Jess, can you tell us a little bit about this before we get into it?
Yeah. So, whereas the first podcast that I ever made was a sci-fi, huge cast, high drama, I mean, there was some laughs, but it's pretty intense at times. I really wanted to try to make something that just felt more like real life and more in the vein of like a Midwestern musical road trip story,
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of featuring this friendship between these two characters and a third character who is one of the friend's cousins. So, like, kind of familial and friendship relationships. And it was just going to be the three of them kind of getting to know each other better and crossing the country on this kind of chaotic road trip
Nice.
mission and singing some songs along the way.
Good stuff. Honestly, I'm here for it. Uh, is there anything that we need to know before we get into this table read?
This is the way that the very first episode opens. We're not going to be singing, unfortunately.
Okay.
But
Had my
I have
pipes
a
warmed up and everything.
yeah, I have a tendency, I joke about this sometimes, that I will make actors sing in projects before I
Mhm.
remember to ask them if they're okay singing. And it is an unalloyed miracle to me that every actor I've ever worked with is still like basically on speaking terms with me, because it is such an ask. But yeah, this is just the way that the first episode opens, cold open. No other background really required.
Fabulous. Well, let's take it away.
All right. Hello?
Hell, oh shit! I just realized where you are. I'm sorry. Oh my god.
B, it's fine.
Oh wow. I'll let you go. Obviously, I just
No, no, you're good.
isn't today. You said 7, right?
I did. It's over.
Oh, the time difference.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting that Pittsburgh's actually pretty far from Chicago.
I do not.
How was the service?
Pretty standard. I mean, she stayed dead, so why'd you call?
Oh no, dude, don't worry about it. You've got other shit to
Yeah, like surviving an entire evening with these people. Come on, tell me what's up. I am hungry for distraction.
Okay, so I'm on this date.
But are you?
I'm hiding in the bathroom, yes. Look, this isn't a Beatrice needs more confidence thing. This is a B is eating dinner with a man who owns a literal bucket full of human teeth thing.
Teeth, like real from a head teeth?
Is there another kind?
Maybe he loves dentures? Okay, out loud, that's not better. An amateur dentist? No, this is getting worse.
He's a collector.
You're at his place?
No, dude, he showed me a photo, a series of photos.
Good. Wait, why?
I, too, have many questions.
Hang on. Are you saying what I think you're saying?
Probably?
You know, I've dreamed of this moment.
Invest in better dreams.
The words, please.
Delia Hammond, will you do me the honor of calling with a made up emergency so I can leave this date without getting serial killed?
I would be honored. And thanks for calling. It's so much better out loud.
You aren't answering your texts. I should probably get going, right? Like, sooner or later, we're gonna hit a weird amount of time for me to be in the bathroom?
Right, because we really care about Dr. Teeth's opinion.
I don't want to be rude or murdered.
Fair. Um, just real quick before you go.
Yeah?
What's it like having a happy, functional family where everyone loves and respects each other?
D.
Is it fun? It looks like fun.
It's pretty great, to be honest.
Yeah. God, I shouldn't be here.
She's your grandma. She'd want you to be able to say goodbye.
She doesn't want anything. That's kind of the point. They booked this ridiculous space, like a bank in an old movie. The ceilings are so high you could fly a kite, and there's waiters in suits going around with champagne and these perfect little pretentious hors d'oeuvres. And I'm standing here in this dress I got from Target for like $15 because it's the only black thing I own that's even a little nice, and it's covered in pills and it's too short. And Aunt Sally will not even make eye contact, and I keep waiting for a security guard to come and check my purse, make sure I'm not just here to steal canapes. And honestly, I might because they're really good.
Hey, you have the right to be there. This is your family.
That's only comforting in your family. Do you guys do you ever wear matching outfits?
What?
Like the Von Trapps.
The Von Trapps were not a healthy family. The mom dies and the dad bans his kids from ever singing again? That's pathological!
He was sad.
And so were his kids, I imagine.
Well, spoiler alert, but I wouldn't put it past old Von Trapp Sr. to reverse his position.
He starts that movie as a full grown adult man. It shouldn't take the intervention of a nun for you to realize you don't footloose your own kids.
You didn't actually answer my question.
Last Christmas, Mom made everybody t shirts. There's photos on my Instagram somewhere. She'd just taken a screen printing class, and we wanted to support her.
Ah, Louise.
She's a cool lady.
Did you get my card?
She did. She's working on thank you notes, but
No, I get it. Shit comes up.
yeah. I'm sorry about your grandma.
She was old.
Doesn't make her less dead.
Wish you could have met her.
Me too.
Hey, so we've got a job to do.
Right.
Although on some level, I think it'd be pretty funny if you climbed out the bathroom window and just made a run for it.
Window's about 10 inches wide.
You thought about it.
He collects teeth!
Look, I swear to God, no judgment, but you have got to learn how to screen these jokers.
Believe me, nowhere in this dude's profile was he all, oh, hey, and if you need, like, a loose fistful of molars, hit me up, girl.
I still think a gentleman like that, there had to be red flags.
I was trying to be, you know, open and non judgmental and giving a guy benefit of the doubt.
There's your first mistake. Okay, so hang up. I'll give you 30 seconds to get back to the table.
Thanks.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Oh, oh, that was delightful. Authors, if you're out there listening to this show right now and you want to do more like trunked bits of audio drama with me, like hit me up, seriously.
I was so excited when you agreed to do this. I secretly was like kind of on the periphery of being a drama kid in high school. And I just like I took it way too seriously. But that was very fun.
Yeah, no, I was I don't know if being a stage and tech kid really counts as being periphery of a drama kid. Like I was just like the goth drama kids, but
I was always a little jealous of the stage and tech kids. They seemed to be a little more grounded. Like like they were the ones that I knew. They were like silly when they wanted to be.
mm-hmm.
But they also existed on planet Earth, which was a quality that I was kind of jealous of.
Oh, yeah. Hey Serena, if you're listening to this, like we were actually pretty grounded, I think, compared to the drama kids. I think you're right there, Jess. Like,
Yeah.
but I'm also realizing like we right before the show we were talking about how I was not at all chill when I was interviewing Chuck Tingle. That episode just came out last month. Listeners, check the feed. Uh, but that I was able to put on my podcast Sona for the hour that we were on the phone together, and that like having a job where I need to be able to act chill when everybody else is freaking out. I probably got some of those skills from doing stage and tech too.
That makes sense. Nobody freaks out like a drama kid freaks out.
Nobody freaks out like a drama kid freaks out. And like, yeah. Yeah. I'm I just remembered, I believe, I'm not going to put anybody on blast here, but would you like a short, silly story about a high school production?
Always.
So we were putting on, I believe, Oliver, and I think it was Oliver, because at the end of the show, a cop shoots Fagin, right? That
I've never seen
sounds,
Oliver, but that sounds very Dickensian.
yeah. So uh, we had, you know, pretty lax control over our props. Uh, and obviously, like, if you've got a cap gun around a bunch of high schoolers, somebody's going to be screwing around with it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Chekhov's cap
so
gun. It's gonna go off.
it's gonna go off. So the second night of the production, and granted, this was a 2 night production. You know, we'd put it on Friday, we'd have a Saturday matinee, and then start strike on Monday afternoon after classes. The kid who was playing the cop who shoots Fagin had, you know, obviously been screwing around with the cap gun a little bit beforehand, and thought that he had gotten it all lined up with a fresh cap ready to fire, but comes onto stage, pulls the trigger, nothing happens. Pulls the trigger, nothing happens. Finally, panics and yells, "Bang!"
Oh no.
At which point Fagin, you know, takes a dive off of the platform and onto the mattress behind it. Everything's fine, right? Wrong. Because he's then standing there in the wings, screwing around with the cap gun, and suddenly it actually goes off.
Oof.
Which is only the second most hilarious thing that ever happened in that I remember from high school theater, but like this isn't that podcast. Uh, but yeah, like seriously, this was a great thing, and I'm super glad to have the opportunity to like do a fun new thing on the podcast. So thank you for that. Uh, can we talk a little bit about how this ended up not going where you wanted it to go initially?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, my conception of it had always been that it was going to be a musical road trip podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a song for it. Um, a song called, let me see if I can pull up the file. It's a very particular title. Um, The World's Largest Frying Pan in All of Iowa.
Amazing, excellent.
Because one of the things that they do in the road trip podcast is they stop at all of the cheesy tourist attractions. That's like
Right, of course.
one of the people on the trip, their condition is that they have to see the biggest frying pan in Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
which um, is a true story. In 2004, they were holding the Cowboy Breakfast Festival in Iowa, Brandon, Iowa, and they were like, "We're gonna build the biggest frying pan in the world." And they did like a scrap metal drive. They organized it all. They built this pan. It's 9 feet wide. It's as tall as an elephant. But they
Incredible.
hadn't done the research beforehand to see what the previous record was.
Oh
And it turned
no.
out they weren't even the biggest frying pan in the US. So now it is enshrined forever as, well, it's the biggest frying pan in Iowa. Like, we did the best we could. It's still pretty big. You can get your picture taken in it. But the metaphor potential of that felt rich.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I had the episode, I had the song. I could not figure out how to get music into the show because the show was so grounded and so uh conversational and so true to um or at least it was so attempting to capture the way that my friends and I really talk to each other that
Mm-hmm.
then stopping for a song felt very weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get anybody. So the thing about pitching an audio drama
Mm-hmm.
versus pitching a novel is that when you pitch a novel and it's already written, you're basically like, here's this thing, it's a
Right.
pile of work. It took me years. I put my heart and soul into it. It's very personal. It's very vulnerable. You put it out there and you're like, hey, do you want to show this to the world? When you're pitching a podcast, you're like, hey, do you want to make this thing that's going to be very expensive and take a lot of work? And it's a really hard sell. And it's especially a hard sell when it's a musical show because
Mm-hmm.
musicals are infinitely harder than just a straight stage podcast, which are already very hard.
Right.
So I just couldn't get anybody with the power to make it happen in an efficient manner. I couldn't get anybody with the power to make it happen to give it a shot,
Mm-hmm.
which is fair. It's a big ask.
Yeah.
And then honestly, what happened is I got a different idea for a different musical Midwest centered podcast where characters are in fact kind of on a road trip that I absolutely decided that I was just going to figure out a way to make someday. And so this kind of more realistic, kind of gentler show
Mm-hmm.
went on the shelf. And there are things that I really like about the project as it exists in this pilot episode.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that um, I think there are things that it does well, and there are things that I wanted to do that I couldn't do with this cast of characters in this situation.
Right. I that I've never done an audio drama, but that makes a lot of sense to me as somebody who has been running a podcast for 4.5 years now.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, yeah. So that uh, it is funny how that happens though, where like one very similar idea, or maybe not very similar, but one idea with a lot of the same sort of generic shapes kind of supplants a previous one.
Yeah.
I have I've written two or three short stories about this idea of like being able to visit somebody on their deathbed, like go back in time and visit somebody on their deathbed so that they don't die alone, and like could never make it land. And finally, last year, I wrote a solo journaling game about it instead,
Oh,
and
cool.
that was like, okay, that's exercised the idea from my brain now, and
Yeah.
like just put that out on itch, and it was like, okay, I don't have to go through like publishing for this in the same way.
Yeah.
I was also going to say about the world's largest frying pan in Iowa, that's like my first instinct was to say, isn't that a Sufjan Stevens song? But then I thought, no, it's probably more of a Fallout Boy or Panic at the Disco circa 2005 song.
Oh
Like,
God. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, all of those pulls are of that era. Like, the gosh, I can't remember any of the titles of songs from Sufjan Stevens' Illinois album other than I think Chicago.
Sure. But there is they are night zombies. Ah, they are chasing us. Ah, it's like three
Yeah,
sentences long and there's a lot of screaming in it. There is that one for sure.
yeah, and of course we've got like uh, I write sins not tragedies. Obviously,
Hmm.
lying is the most fun a girl can have without taking her clothes off. I think is I somebody take away my emo card. I do not remember if that's a Fallout Boy or Panic at the Disco song, but
I believe that is Panic at the Disco.
I believe it. I
Yeah.
one way or another. I mean, of all the gin joints in all the world, etc.
Hmm.
Uh, very much an era of song titling that gave rise to some amazing fanfic titles later on down the line, of course.
Very, very useful in the creative ecosystem
Yeah,
for that purpose. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I mean, like, rich history of taking quotes or titles from one thing and using them in another. For instance, Stars Hide Your Fires.
Mhm.
Like how I did that one?
That was very smooth.
It's almost like the first three times I Googled the book, the first result that came up was a Macbeth quote,
Hmm.
immediately followed by some piece of press about your book, which is, I, at the time of recording, have not yet finished it, but it is an absolute romp of sci fi YA adventure. We've got romance. We've got heists. Obviously, love a heist. Uh, just a really fun time. Can we talk a little bit about this book right now? And I know I'm sequence breaking, but the segue just came out so naturally.
Yeah, sure.
So, Stars Hard You Fires, obviously, which just came out on July the 11th from our good friends at Quirk Books. Uh, if you had to give a two-sentence elevator pitch on this,
I would say a would-be heist turns into a life or death murder mystery in space. That's one sentence. I have another sentence. And it's queer. There you go. Two sentences.
perfect. Yeah. Didn't I somehow managed to not mention that it was queer, but like gay books, we got them, we want them, we love them. Um, yeah, just absolutely fantastic book, and I've been seeing a whole lot of amazing press, and saw recently that you had a feature in Tor.com about it. So, lots of folks are talking about it, and listeners, if any of those things sounds like something you're interested in, also social commentary. Did we
Mhm.
mention social commentary? Because like there's a strong vein of fuck capitalism and fuck the ruling class in this book. Uh, if you like any of those things, listeners, even if even if the sum total isn't something that you would normally read, I think you're gonna want to read this one. Um, Gosh, there was a thing that I was gonna say right after that, and then it left my brain.
And it's okay. It'll come back like 6 hours from now when you don't need
Oh
it
yeah,
anymore.
no, it'll be perfect. And then I'll email you about it, and then I'll say, "Yeah, we don't need to do a pickup about that. This isn't the show that does pickups."
Fair.
Um, I did remember actually what I was gonna say, so it
Oh,
works
great
out.
work. Yeah.
Uh, so as somebody who has worked in both an audio drama format and obviously writing published prose, can you talk a little bit about if there are any differences in terms of your writing process between the two?
Hmm. It's a good question. I think that I tend to write faster in audio drama space just because you don't have to stop and think about how anything looks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's generally held that you do have to at least know what's happening in your head in terms of like blocking when characters are moving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for instance, in The Strange Case of Starship Iris, my sci-fi adventure kind of found family spaceship story, there's a race of aliens, and the only real information you get about them is that they're purple.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all the information I have about them. I don't know. I don't know what they
Yep.
look like. And people will draw them, and I'll be like, "Oh, great! The main alien's name is Krej." People will draw fan art of Krej, and every single time it's completely different every single time. And every single time I look at it, and I'm like, "Great! Yeah, that's what Krej looks like. Love it."
Yep.
Sometimes it's like kind of a crab creature. Fantastic. Into it. Yeah, great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then with prose, I actually have to stop and think, okay, this thing is happening. What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it, like all of the senses that you don't have access to in audio drama. And there are ways that that's easier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was just thinking about how you can do so much with body language in a book. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
have a character like touch another character's shoulder, and it can mean the equivalent of like a page of dialogue. And you just,
Right.
touching a shoulder doesn't sound like anything in an audio drama. I
Mm-hmm.
I annoy my sound designers because I write a lot of hugs in. Hugs don't sound like anything. I mean, if you run at someone, it can like
uh,
there can be kind of a smack, but like that doesn't immediately translate in a listener's ear always to like, oh, they're probably hugging right now.
mm-hmm.
And there are ways around that in audio drama where you can find a way to work that into um, the dialogue in some way, acknowledge verbally that it happened. But it's the ease of just letting a character do a thing is so different in prose.
Mm-hmm. I definitely have the problem a lot of the times where I love writing dialogue. I've toned it down a little bit, but I used to just like in college especially, I was just writing the snappiest dialogue you ever heard, like, you know, walked out of a Hollywood writer's room type stuff. And like this was even before this was like before like the height of quippy MCU movie
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to the point one of my professors told me like tone down the snappiness a little bit. Like nobody talks like this. Uh, but like then you ask me, okay, but where are they? What are they doing? Like what do these people look like? I'm just give you this blank look. Uh, and like yeah, really have to. I can imagine that speed translating really well for writing audio dramas, especially because like that can be a space, like we just heard, uh, where snappiness really works in your favor. And also, like, I find a certain amount of appeal in the idea of not having to figure out, because we don't want to do, obviously we don't want to do Tom Swifties too much, uh, but like figuring out how to tag emotion in dialogue can really be a drag sometimes, and to be
Hmm.
able to just tag it at the beginning
Hmm.
and be like, okay, actor, you figure this out. Great.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
And there's so much trust in the degree of collaboration in making an audio drama,
Mm-hmm.
where I will sometimes, especially for the purple alien Krej in Strange Case of Starship Iris, sometimes I will write a line of dialogue and I'll be like, Krej says this word really weirdly. Krej says this word in a way that is hilarious. And the actor, Brittany, will just knock it out of the park every time. It's fantastic. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When you have good people, it takes a lot off your plate. But then your
Mm-hmm.
plate is full of other things when you're making an audio drama because it's logistically really, really complicated.
Yeah. I was just thinking, in some ways, writing an audio drama and being able to put trust in your characters is a little bit like writing fanfic, where you don't have to do the same level of setup of like, who are these people,
Yes,
how do they react to things, because it's all right there.
yes,
um
absolutely. And I came from the fanfic writing space. That was what I was. I mean, I still write fanfic, but that was what I was doing before audio drama. That was like
mm-hmm.
the I don't know how to say this. Uh that was what I don't know. I don't know. I can't think of a good metaphor, which is a like that was the slippery slope, I guess, that led me down into the pit of audio drama. That's not
Mm-hmm.
good, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. No, the closest thing to this table read that we just did is a friend of mine and I did a recorded a podfic that has not been put out yet, because the author hasn't responded yet and said, "Yeah, actually, do please release a podfic of this episode." But a recorded a podfic of a kind of meta fic in a fandom about a podcast.
Whoa,
We're just going in circles.
layers.
Podcast within a podcast, not Mabim Bam related. This isn't the Munch Squad, but um, the the podcast is Friends at the Table. Obviously, longtime listeners will know that I am contractually obligated to mention Friends at the Table at least once an episode. You can see it right there if you go to friendsatthecable.cash. But that is the two characters from a recent season doing a send up of the fake podcast that the two voice actors, the two players, do for some of their bonus content and other streams and random things. And in the event that we do release this podcast, I'm not going to say anything else because I don't want to publicly out my AO3 username.
I hear that.
Obviously, astute listeners in the audience will probably be able to figure out which this is if they are as friends at the table pilled as I am. But that it, if you find it, be cool.
Yeah,
We don't talk about that.
yeah.
But like, it is very much that thing of like, you know, we when me and my friend were doing this, we knew what the inflection both of the characters and of the players was, and kind of like what that energy was. And so it's like, you know, there were little tags within it of like, you know, laughing here, barely controlled glee or whatever, but like, you know, it was the purest textual representation of audio media available. And
Yeah.
so like this same thing of like doing an audio drama, I can see the appeal of that, and I can see how that translates.
Yeah.
It is really interesting what you were talking about earlier, though, of this idea of, you know, when typically when you're writing fiction, you are pitching, you're querying a whole book.
Hmm.
You know, that's not necessarily the case in the nonfiction space, but that audio dramas are much more kind of, in a lot of cases, much more like getting traditional, you know, television or movies done, where you're pitching an idea more so than you're pitching a finished object.
Yeah.
And that's something I hadn't really thought about. As soon as you mentioned it, it was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And
Um,
like,
oh yeah, go ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, because there's kind of two roads that you can take when you're making an audio drama, which is you can go through the whole pitching process, or you can kickstart it and make it yourself. I mean, you can also, um, theoretically, depending on the scale of the thing, like do it all yourself and not have to raise money in the front.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always had ideas that were too big for me to make myself. And I've always really believed in paying people. I mean, capitalism is a prison, but we're all in that
Mm-hmm.
prison together, and you got to respect people's time as well as you can.
Yeah.
I can't afford to pay anybody what they're truly worth on any project that I do, just because it would cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Um, but so it's to the point now where I'll get an idea for an audio drama. Like, I don't know if you experience this, but like I will get an idea for something that will be like poem shaped, and I'll be like,
Mm-hmm.
great, fantastic, a poem. I can knock that out in 2 days. It'll be done. I won't have to think about it anymore. Or like, you get an idea that's like short story shaped, great, like 10,000 words. That's maybe like a week or two of like really hard writing, and then you edit it and then it's done. I'll get an idea for a novel occasionally, and I'll be like, oh shit, do I want to spend 6 months on this? And it's the same thing with making a podcast, where I'll get an idea for a podcast and I'll be like, if I want to do this right, this will be like a year of my life or more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little scary at this point to get an idea for a podcast. It's a little bit like getting married to this idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, yeah, so the pitching process is one thing, and making it from scratch is another thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes ideas get shelved because they don't survive the pitching process, and I'm just like, I don't have the capacity to make this myself.
For sure, for sure, for sure. Um, I think we were talking on mic beforehand, but Sarah Gailey came up, and I can't remember if I've told this story on the show before, but the my original concept for this podcast, I decided I wanted to make a podcast where I got a chance to talk to writers, and which seemed like, I can do this because I'm friends with a lot of writers and am a writer myself, and so like I come with a little bit of cred there. But my initial concept had been way back at like the start of 2019. For some reason, I had my own juvenilia on the brain, and like thinking about like when I was in like first and second and third grade, fourth grade, even like one of the things that everybody in those classes did pretty regularly was like write picture books,
Hmm.
and like you would write the book, you would illustrate two copies of it. They would get bound. One copy would go into the classroom library and then eventually into the school's like general library. Another copy would go home with you. Uh, and I was thinking like, oh, this is like, wouldn't it be wild? Wouldn't it be funny to have a show where like you got people to come on and they would read their old juvenilia? And I was, talking about this and pitched it to some of my friends, and Sarah Gailey, bless their heart, not in the Southern way, uh, like truly bless you, Sarah Gailey was like, Bud, that might be kind of a tough pitch because nobody knows who you are right now. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's fair. And they were like, and like, I don't know that I'd necessarily want to do that, but I would love to read some of my trunk stories. Uh, and I was like, okay, I can work with that. And then, like, being the weird little ghoul that I am, immediately my brain was like, okay, trunk stories, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Trunk. We got it. And like 2 months later was releasing the first episode of this show with Sarah Gailey as that first guest. But like knowing the ability to know or have somebody who you trust who can tell you like, does this scale match what your capabilities are, is like super vital.
Yeah.
And like, this is obviously like, this is a as indie as you can get show, pretty much. Like, I am lucky enough to have some Patreon backers who cover the basic bills for the show, but like, that's it. Like, I'm not really making money off of this show, nor is that like my goal.
Mhm.
I want to make this show because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Um, but like, and like, obviously, uh, it's different when you're doing an audio drama. Like, you want to be able to like, if you have actors, you want to be able to pay the actors. The actors are important.
Yeah. Yeah.
We stand in solidarity with our striking siblings,
Hell yeah.
who, as of this moment recording, like, I don't know what August is going to look like. Like, the Teamsters are probably going to be on strike at the point this is airing, maybe, or maybe they will have gotten a fair contract at that point. But like, you know, what the point is, like, labor is worth something, and if we have to
Yes.
live in capitalism, we should be able to survive in capitalism.
Yes.
Which was
Absolutely.
not the initial point we were making. The initial point we were making was, wow, pitching an audio drama sure is a different thing than pitching a novel.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing with making audio drama, just to like tangent, is that
Please do.
the production costs are insane. Like just the time that it takes to design the sound if you want it to sound good,
Mm-hmm.
basically. I mean, like depending on the scope of your project, again, because right, you can have a show where you build into the conceit that it is somebody talking at a microphone, and that's
Right.
very different from the kind of stuff that I write where there's like big action set pieces happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with like fully designed actiony uh sound design, I think it's every minute of audio takes an hour to create.
I believe that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the first season of Starship Iris, um, the audio person that I had, I was like, keep track of your hours and I'll try to pay. And she was like, no, I'm not going to do that. That it would make me very tired. And I was like, oh,
Uh,
that's fair. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean this is a two people talking into a microphone thing, and it is not very produced. I make it sound nice,
Yes.
but the money I have put into it so far is I paid Lillian Boyd for theme music,
Mm,
which she did an awesome job at, and I've refined my process to the point that it takes about 2 to 3 hours to produce a 1 hour episode, which is pretty good. I think
yeah,
that's pretty good.
that's
But
excellent.
I'm thinking about like the I don't know, the difference between the first season of Welcome to Night Vale
Mm,
versus what that production has become now, where like, easy conceit, community radio, one person talking into a microphone,
yeah.
and you've got music in the middle of it, and like the amount of production, I can only imagine the amount of production that goes into it now, especially since like, you know I've seen uh Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner talking about like people getting mad at them for just using Audacity to make the show, which like, sure, I make my show in Audacity. Most people who I've talked to making this when I started this podcast were like, yeah, I just use Audacity, it's fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, it is wild. It is wild the amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't mean to minimize the amount of work that it takes to make a person at a microphone podcast either. Like
Hmm.
it it's a labor of love no matter how you
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
Speaking of not doing sound design and not getting
Mhm.
sued by the BBC, this I don't know if this came through the microphone to you across Zoom, but there was this weird sound that just happened in the room, the podcast room, and this blue police box showed up, and I'm wondering if we can take a step into this time machine. Here's the corny intro I told you I was going to do before we started recording. If we can take a step into this time machine and go back and talk to young writer Jess, young audio drama Jess, and offer her and by extension our listeners any words of wisdom.
Absolutely. You said it was going to be cheesy. I am so here for it. It was exactly what I wanted from that setup. Um, so I if I was going to talk to past me, say like high school, maybe
Mm-hmm.
middle school, um, I mean, genuinely, the first thing I would do would be I would say like, I'm sorry that I don't get any taller. You're gonna be 5'2" forever. I know you're holding out on hope that you're gonna be like average height, and you won't be. But like, make peace with it. It's okay. There's good things about it. You can
Mm-hmm.
generally headbutt your luggage into an overhead bin, and when you can't, somebody will help you put it up there. Like it's gonna be fine.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think that the main thing that I would say is to just not be ashamed of the things that interest you and the
Mm-hmm.
things that you love to write about. Um, I majored in creative writing actually in
Oh,
college.
high five! Me too.
Yeah, hey. But the stuff that really interested me was like queer stories and genre fiction, and I was not comfortable like writing any of that. Like everybody around me was writing literary fiction,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay, well, I feel fake trying to do that thing. So what I wound up doing was I wrote nonfiction. I wrote creative nonfiction about food
Mm-hmm.
and making food for other people and what we use food to mean in our culture. And there's like a fair bit of food in Stars Hide Your Fires actually because I
Yeah.
gotta be me.
Yep.
Um, but I felt So I felt like such a phony for caring so much about all of these things that I was afraid to put on paper. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that I would say, everybody says like write what you know. And I think there is like it's kind of overused advice in some ways. There are things about it that are helpful. Kind of like any writing advice, like it's useful for some people some of the time. It's not useful for everybody all the time.
Right.
Um, but I think that I would say, like, really, especially when you're just starting out and you kind of know that you're going to need some time to really get into the groove and find your voice, like, write what you love,
Mm-hmm.
and don't feel weird about it. And I mean, as much as you can, not feel weird about it. I'm imagining telling younger me to not feel weird about something, and
Mm-hmm.
younger me is rolling her eyes very hard because
Not
that's
gonna
just
happen.
not that's just not how that's going to happen. But like, Stars Hide Your Fires has so many tropes that are just things that I loved in genre fiction that made me so excited to see uh, in other people's writing.
Mm-hmm.
There's this attempted heist, there's this found family element, there's a sing along at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's so much more rewarding to write about things that you can be excited about that just make you happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will offer the piece of advice as the person who didn't decide that I felt like a phony, but instead picked fights with most of my professors.
Oh,
Uh,
fascinating. How did
know
that
when to
go?
pick your battles. Because
Yeah.
some professors are going to be very receptive, and some professors will double down.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Luckily, most of my professors in my fiction classes were much more receptive. So, shouts to them. Anti shouts to the one professor who just dug their heels in and made a lot of comments that offend me on both a personal and professional level. Like, oh yeah, Tolkien, my kid was into that, but then he grew out of it.
Whoa.
Uh huh.
Dang.
Like, I mean, luckily, I wasn't a person who yet had multiple pieces of Tolkiana tattooed onto my body at that point, but like, spiritually, I was already there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, listeners, know when to pick your battles.
Yeah.
But like, absolutely, yeah, go after the things you love, even if I didn't end up taking creative nonfiction classes until my senior year, and I kind of a little part of me regrets that. Most of me is like, oh, you took them when you needed to, you took them when you could, and like you got a whole lot. I think I probably got more out of them then than I would have earlier in my career, just because like I'd grown as a writer in the previous 3 years. But
Sure.
like, I do sometimes wish like that I had gotten to take those classes sooner, just because of the way they were. But yeah, like go after, even if you find you have to come at it sideways, go after the things you love, and like, because everybody else and especially you can tell when your heart's not in a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple of things before we wrap up here. One, obviously, Stars Hide Your Fires, I think deserves the most attention right now. But are there any other works that you have out recently or not so recently or upcoming that you'd like our listeners to know about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have let's see if I can get all the adjectives in one shot. Queer high school fake dating rom-com podcast.
Fantastic.
I did it.
You did it.
Uh, yeah. That is kind of My pitch is that it's a rom-com about how the personal is political.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is out wherever you get podcasts. It's called Keep It Steady.
Fantastic.
There are, I think, 5 episodes out. Eventually, there will be 12. I don't know when the next episodes will be coming out because the trade-off of acknowledging that everybody on your team is a full human being with a full life is that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, things come up, people get new jobs or take vacations, and stuff
For sure.
doesn't get done in a timely fashion. But it will happen eventually because I care very deeply about it. And then there are 2 full seasons out of The Strange Case of Starship Iris, which is the aforementioned queer found family sci-fi space adventure podcast
I'm
featuring
sensing some themes here.
a little bit. I like what I like. I mean,
Hey,
um,
we just said some things about that.
yeah, yeah. That is one area where I very much live what I say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Um,
And obviously, listeners, links to all of those things will be in the show notes.
yes. Oh, I have one more. I have one more.
Oh, perfect.
Um,
Yes.
uh, there's also Unwell, which is a Midwestern Gothic mystery
Oh, nice.
about a woman who moves back to a mysterious small Ohio town after her mother has a health scare and moves into her mom's strange boarding house. And
Ooh,
its idiosyncratic guests get to all know each other. And there
fantastic.
are 4 full seasons of that out, and the fifth one is in the process of coming out right now. And
Excellent.
Unwell is a fantastic team. Everybody is so incredibly talented. There's 3 other writers, and they are all just the best.
Awesome. Well, I am a sucker for things gothic and for a good story told however it gets told. Uh, Speaking of things that we are suckers for, is there anything in the broader media landscape that you have been digging particularly recently and you want our listeners to know about?
Oh my gosh. I
This
mean,
is the
I have
question where you ask it, and I've never read, watched, or listened to a damn thing.
that's, yeah, it's all up my mind at once. The very normie answer, although it's extremely good, is The Bear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which again, it's like a story about food and about weirdos kind of coming together. Even though it's also extremely stressful sometimes. I would say listen to it, like no. I would say watch it, um, but plan to watch something gentle and kind after it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much it needs a chaser of some kind.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. I am listening to a lot of Phoebe Bridgers, which
Nice.
um just excellent, excellent music. Um, and oh gosh, what else? There is a nonfiction podcast called Criminal.
Mm,
Um,
I love Criminal.
yes, yes. Hosted by Phoebe Judge, who's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was recently thinking about how there is a plot detail in Stars Hide Your Fires where a character does a kind of minor crime that there is a full episode on
Mm-hmm.
in Criminal, and I don't know if I should say it or not because it's like a little bit of a spoiler, but not really like a huge spoiler. But anyway, Criminal is fantastic. It is not like a creepy true crime podcast. It's very much
Mm-hmm.
about like just the human, real lives and experiences that kind of happen crime adjacently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much a Radiotopia show.
Yes.
It's very
Although I
much
don't think
like
it's on Radiotopia anymore, but it
no, I don't
definitely
think
has that
so.
ethos. Yeah.
Yeah. But like listeners, if you are into 99% Invisible, which also not on Radiotopia anymore,
Mhm.
or The Illusionist or Articles of Interest, like very much along those same lines of like we're gonna take a framing thing, but then we're gonna just get into the human elements of it,
Yes.
and like bring a really refreshing level of sincerity and compassion to the
Yes,
subjects.
very much so.
Yeah. Um,
I probably recommended it before on something, but like it's one of those things that comes up and like every time it comes up in my feed, I'm like immediate listen. It's
mhm.
going right in the headphones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you said I'm going to give the most normie answer possible, uh, I was just going to say, oh yeah, I've also just been listening to Taylor's version of Fearless, which listeners, I don't know if you know the story behind that. I'm not going to try to tell it, but look up the reason that Taylor Swift has been putting out all her old albums again, because like respect
Hmm.
respect there. And also like they're all really good still. But yeah, normie stuff. Normie stuff for sure. But
Yeah.
good.
Sometimes you like a thing and a lot of other people like it, and that's fine actually.
Yeah.
The indie music snob in my head can just take a hike. It's okay to like things other people like too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Going back to 2005 and the two wolves that live in my head, and one of the two wolves inside of me, and one of them is Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, My Chemical Romance, and the other one is Sufjan Stevens. Like it's fine. It's actually fine and good to like things that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Also, going back to your words of wisdom, like the things you like. You're allowed to do it.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Uh Finally, and this is a loaded question as Twitter self destructs more and more by the day. But Jess, where can our listeners find you elsewhere?
That's a great question in this particular moment. And by great, I mean hard, and I'm stalling. Okay.
Uh
I have a website. It is www.jessicamarybest.com. And you can sign up for my newsletter there, as if it was 2003. Um, and that might be the most efficient way to figure out what's going on with me because you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Jesserbest there.
mm-hmm.
You can follow me on Twitter if you really like jumping into ships that are already like halfway underwater. Same handle there. And I would say like I don't have it in me to give the listening public my Tumblr.
That's
It's
fair.
there. If you find it, you find it. Yeah, but like I'm not gonna drop those breadcrumbs.
Uh Listeners, I've dropped the breadcrumbs before. You can find my Tumblr. It's under the same username as all my other shit. It's probably me at my most unhinged in terms of internet.
But that's what Tumblr's
So
for. That's just
yeah,
using
that's
Tumblr correctly.
if you're not going on and making the most unhinged posts possible on Tumblr or reblogging other people's unhinged posts, like I guess there's some part of that website that does that, but I don't know about it. I don't use
Yeah.
that website. This is the unhinged nerds shit website.
Yeah. And weirdly, it's still around. It might outlast everything, which is incredible.
I
Who would have predicted it?
honestly, we love to see a success story like this. Lose Verizon billions of dollars. Man, we
Incredible.
we couldn't even lose Elon Musk his $40 billion. He just took those L's all on his own.
Yeah. Yeah. Really just some phenomenal failure Olympics happening there.
It's incredible. Incredible stuff there. Well, Jess, before we just dive into that whole thing, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on, and you did a great job on the Flip the Table read. Thank you
Excellent.
for meeting the energy. I really really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Tales from the Trunk is mixed and produced in beautiful Oakland, California. Our theme music is Paper Wings by Lillian Boyd. you can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/trunkcast. All patrons of the show now get a sticker and logo button, along with show outtakes and other content that can't be found anywhere else. Assuming the website still exists, you can find the show on Twitter at Trunkcast, and I tweet at HBBisnieks. See also Tumblr and Blue Sky and co-host probably, though I'm never on there, and most of the places. If you like the show, consider taking a moment to rate and review us on your preferred podcast platform. And remember, don't self-reject.